chat with him. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning. Hey, just right off the top, a shout out to all your sponsors. You know what?
Yes.
You know what? Thank you so much. Without the sponsors, we just absolutely can't do this. And
Absolutely.
and that's why we want to continue to make the show better and better and better, so that the sponsors get more and more and more responses to their advertising. You know what? I live and die by advertising. I have for 50 years, and it's so
Mhm.
good to see that. So just again, thank you for having me
Fantastic.
on. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. It's my pleasure every single time. So, what are we going to share today, Harry?
Well, first off, I've got so much to talk about, so I got to make sure I don't run on and run out and do whatever, like so
Right.
many inexperienced speakers do. You always get to that point where somebody has so much to say, and then and before you know it, they haven't said anything. And
Right? Yes,
so
that's me.
today, Tom Tycrobe is a good friend of mine from the Interlake, and we've talked about him before. He's a cattle rancher, has about 450 cows and calves. Hopefully by this April they're going to start calving. But I did a chat with him on what he does with
Mhm.
cold weather and cattle outside, because I saw
Okay.
a story out of Louisiana where this man, one ranch lost 16 calves in one day.
Ooh,
16
ouch.
calves in one day because of cold weather. They weren't ready for the kind of weather, and they didn't have our weather. But,
Mm-hmm.
there they were putting calves into bathtubs, into hot tubs of water, everything, just to try and keep them alive. And
Right.
yes, and so they don't have the shelter. But here's what Tom Tycrobe told me about what he does. He says when weather hits 20 to minus 20, he says anytime after that, any minus 10 degrees, you've got to up the feed, up the
Okay.
feed. So he does two things. He finds out, he lives in that treed area. He's got a lot of treed areas. So he tries to keep the cattle on the proper side where they can have the shelter from the wind. He
Right.
says, and secondly, to make sure that he has ample feed. And he called it volumes of feed because I feed them everything they can eat. And
Okay.
and and he says basically once it hits to minus 30 and minus 35, he says they don't gain. The target gain for a cattle producer like him is
Hmm.
like two uh, about 2 pounds per day. But
Okay.
he says when you hit minus 40, you don't even think that. He says they may gain a little bit, but he says
Yeah.
cattle, if looked after properly like that, they
Mhm.
are God's creatures. He created them, right? They have back fat, they have fur, and if you've kept them healthy and
Yeah.
you get them into shelter and where they can calve and be looking after themselves, then things don't. He doesn't even think of losing a calf. Then I go
Hmm.
right back to that man in Louisiana, which is sad, 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 because he said this week they would lose about 94% of all their calves to the cold.
Wowzers.
Yes, I mean that's their income. That's your
Hmm.
advertising.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
it's their income. So that's a so when I compared those two, I found that very interesting because Tom
Yes.
had given me, and he's a top notch rancher. I like
Hmm.
to go to him on these things. So yes, and so he says yes, it's not you're not gaining feed, but you're making sure you keep your animals healthy,
Right.
sheltering them and by feeding them as much energy, protein as you possibly they can eat.
Yes.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
so that's the first. The second point I talked about Tom about, and that has to do with the whole agri stability. You have agri stability, which is a federal government. Right now, we have he said, she said, kind of duck, and one guy ducks, one doesn't. But the agriculture minister, Minister Bibu, who's a federal minister of ag, she had
Hmm.
a meeting before Christmas that I was part of, and there they had the other ag ministers involved, and this agri stability is an insurance program that is run jointly by the federal government and the provincial governments.
Okay.
So the federal government upped the ante and said, yeah, we're going to improve it, but we need all the provincial governments to be online with us. Well,
Mm-hmm.
in Manitoba, Blaine Peterson, and this is what Tom Teichrob said. He says, Mr. Peterson, our ag minister, you've got to look at those changes because those are the changes we need in the agricultural industry to keep moving ahead. It's not a handout. It's an insurance policy. They pay into it, but they need it to be a little bit higher so that it can pay out properly. So that was my second point today.
Okay.
And then
Mm-hmm.
and then the other. Do I have a bit of time yet?
Yes, absolutely you do.
And the third point has to do with, again, the federal minister of agriculture announced Canada Food Policy Committee on last week Friday, and I was in on that conference, and boy, it just tore me apart because
Mm-hmm.
here we produce most of the food in Canada, here in Western Canada, but
Okay.
we have one. Only two people from Western Canada on a 23 member committee on Canada food policy. It's right, and it's almost, I can't believe it. And the
Mm-hmm.
one fella is Larry McIntosh, and from Winnipeg, peak of the market, bless his soul, he's great. But he represents only a very small number of the vegetable producers. Then we
Right.
have another student from Saskatoon, a master's student, and he's on there. The rest are all from Eastern Canada. And so they want to set food policy for all of Canada. And they said, yes, there's some farmers on it, but at the same time, only token farmers. So I'm really looking to see what's going to happen with that food policy because it
Mm-hmm.
smacks of control, control, control. And our farmers
Right.
in Western Canada don't need more control. They are as
Mm-hmm.
good a farmer as you can find anywhere in the world. So that was my other point, and then together with that is a farm organization that claims to have 20,000 members. We don't know where they're from. They want the federal government to come up with $300 million in the next budget to help the farmers deal with climate change. And again, I'll get into that some other time because I know I'm running out of time. But those
No
are
worries.
the issues that are there for me to consider today. And as I said told you before, I've been struggling with the whole aspect of falling on December the
Yes.
20th. And yesterday I find out I've got two broken ribs. So I got to heal, and I keep healing. And but I was happy to be on with you this morning. So
And it's
somewhere,
always my pleasure to have you here.
somehow, sometime, I will see you again. And that's Seaman Says.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, Harry.